I'm Isabella, 35 years old, and I never thought my daughter Lily would become the unexpected hero of our family Christmas. For 16 years, I've navigated marriage to Michael and the shadow of his mother Margaret's disapproval. Every December, we attend her lavish Seattle Christmas gathering, where perfection isn't requested, it's required. This year, I prayed for holiday peace, but when Margaret publicly humiliated my 14-year-old over a simple accident, everything changed. Where are you watching from today? Before I share how my quiet daughter stunned an entire room of judgmental relatives, hit that like button and subscribe. If you've ever had to choose between family harmony and standing up for what's right. The complicated relationship with my mother-in-law began the moment Michael brought me home to meet his family. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Portland, the daughter of a high school teacher and a nurse. Our holidays meant homemade decorations, slightly burned cookies, and genuine laughter. Michael's world couldn't have been more different. The first time I visited the Harrison family estate, I felt like I'd stepped into a different universe. The sprawling mansion in Seattle's most exclusive neighborhood looked like something from a magazine spread, rather than a home where people actually lived. Margaret Harrison, with her perfectly coiffed silver hair and designer wardrobe, greeted me with a smile that never reached her eyes. "So you're the girl who's captured Michael's attention," she'd said, scanning me from head to toe. "Interesting choice, darling." That set the tone for our relationship over the next 16 years. Margaret came from old money and had married into even more wealth. Status appearances and social connections weren't just important to her. They were the currency by which she measured human worth. And according to her unspoken but obvious judgment, I was bankrupt. Michael was her only son, her pride and joy destined in her mind for a society wife who would enhance the Harrison legacy. Instead, he fell in love with me, creative casual and completely unimpressed by family names or trust funds. The disappointment radiated from her in waves whenever we were together. "Isabella dear," she'd say at family gatherings, "that outfit is so brave. I could introduce you to my stylist if you're interested." Or, "This chicken is quite flavorful. So nice to see you experimenting with actual recipes." Each comment was designed to cut while maintaining plausible deniability. If I reacted, I was being overly sensitive. If Michael defended me, she would look wounded and insist she was only trying to help. The real heartbreak was watching Michael navigate between his love for me and his ingrained need for his mother's approval. He'd stand up for me in private, promising to talk to her, but in her presence, he'd transform back into the dutiful son. After particularly tense encounters, we'd argue in the car ride home. "You know how she is," he'd say. "She doesn't mean anything by it." But we both knew she did. When Lily was born 14 years ago, I hoped things would change. What grandmother could resist a beautiful baby girl? Margaret cooed appropriately and bought extravagant gifts. But soon her controlling nature extended to my parenting. "You're not still breastfeeding, are you? Formula is perfectly acceptable now, Isabella. Don't you think she should be enrolled in that prestigious preschool connections matter from day one?" As Lily grew, it became clear she inherited my creative spirit, rather than the Harrison drive for perfection and status. She painted, wrote stories, and saw beauty in chaos. Her bedroom was always a colourful explosion of half-finished art projects. Her uniform from the private school, Margaret insisted on paying for, often returned home with paint stains or grass marks. Margaret would purse her lips when Lily showed up with mismatched socks, or when she'd rather discuss the book she was reading than practice proper dinner conversation. "She needs more structure, Isabella, more guidance." What Margaret saw as flaws, I recognized as the authentic spirit of my daughter, compassionate, thoughtful, and refreshingly genuine. Lily and I formed a protective alliance, often giggling together after particularly stuffy family events, releasing the tension of being constantly judged. Michael loved his daughter fiercely, but couldn't see how his mother's subtle criticisms were affecting her confidence. "Mom just wants the best for Lily," he'd insist. "She wants her to have every advantage." Last Christmas had been particularly tense. Margaret had given Lily an expensive dress that was 2 sizes too small, then remarked loudly about young ladies watching their figures. I'd seen the hurt flash across my daughter's face before she masked it with a polite thank you. Later that night, I held her as she cried, questioning if something was wrong with her body. That moment hardened something in me, but for Michael's sake, and honestly for the financial support Margaret provided for Lily's education, I continued the delicate dance of appeasing the Queen while protecting my daughter as best I could. This Christmas, I was determined to keep the peace. Michael had been under tremendous pressure at work, and I didn't want to add to his stress. I told myself we could endure one more perfect Christmas at Margaret's house. Just smile, nod, and get through it. I couldn't have known that this would be the Christmas everything finally broke, and then began to heal in ways I never could have anticipated. The week before Margaret's Christmas extravaganza was always stressful, but this year seemed particularly intense. Perhaps it was because Lily was getting older, becoming more aware of the undercurrents between her grandmother and me, or maybe it was Margaret's escalating expectations. "Mum, what exactly am I supposed to buy for a woman who literally buys herself islands?" Lily asked, as we navigated the upscale department store, searching for the perfect gift for Margaret. I smiled at her exaggeration. Margaret didn't own islands, just vacation properties on several of them. "We'll find something meaningful," I assured her, though I wondered if Margaret and meaningful could exist in the same sentence. "Maybe something you make." Lily's face brightened. "Actually, I've been working on something special, a hand-painted ornament with a portrait of Grandma's house in the snow." My heart swelled with love for my daughter's generous spirit, even as I worried about Margaret's reaction to a homemade gift. In previous years, our heartfelt offerings had been met with thin smiles and quick relegation to a drawer never to be seen again. "That sounds beautiful," I said carefully. "Maybe we should also get something from her approved list." Margaret actually distributed a gift suggestion list each year, complete with acceptable stores and price ranges, another way to control and judge. We settled on an expensive silk scarf in Margaret's preferred shade of blue, spending far more than our budget allowed, and Lily continued working on her ornament in secret, pouring love into every brushstroke. 3 days before Christmas, Michael came home late from work looking exhausted. As he loosened his tie, he gave me a tentative smile. "Mum called today," he began, and I felt the familiar tightening in my chest. "She wants to make sure we're prepared for Saturday. She's having some important guests this year. A state senator and his wife, some executives from the foundation board." Translation: "Be on your absolute best behavior. The stakes are even higher." "We'll be fine," I assured him, though we both knew fine by Margaret's standards was nearly impossible to achieve. She specifically mentioned appropriate dinner conversation topics and making sure Lily understands the importance of proper etiquette. He couldn't meet my eyes as he relayed this message. "Lily has beautiful manners," I said, feeling defensive. "Margaret's expectations are just impossible." I know. Michael sighed, running a hand through his dark hair, now sprinkled with grey, that hadn't been there a few years ago. "I promised this year would be different. I'll talk to Mum, make sure she gives Lily some space." But his promise rang hollow. 16 years of similar assurances had taught me that Michael, for all his good intentions, remained his mother's son first and my husband second, when push came to shove. Later that evening, I overheard Michael on the phone in his office door, slightly ajar. "Yes, Mum, I understand your standards. No, I've spoken to both of them. Yes, Isabella knows how important this is. I'm sure Lily will be on her best behaviour." His voice carried that particular tone, apologetic yet tense, that always emerged when trapped between his mother's demands and his desire to defend his family. I walked away before he could see me, a familiar sadness settling in my chest. That night, I helped Lily prepare for the upcoming dinner. We practiced which forks to use appropriate dinner conversation, and the art of the polite but non-committal response to Margaret's inevitable passive-aggressive comments. "Just remember," I told her as we folded napkins into fancy shapes, "this isn't about you. Grandma has her own issues that have nothing to do with how amazing you are." Lily nodded, but I could see the anxiety building behind her blue eyes. So like her father's, yet filled with a sensitivity he often suppressed. "I really want her to like my gift," Lily confessed, showing me the nearly finished ornament. It was stunning, a miniature watercolour of Margaret's house in winter, complete with the grand entrance and famous Douglas fir in the front yard, all contained within a crystal ornament Lily had saved up to buy. "It's beautiful," I said truthfully. "If she can't appreciate this, then that's her loss." But we both knew it would be Lily who would feel the loss if her grandmother rejected her heartfelt creation. The day before Christmas Eve, we packed our overnight bags for the obligatory stay at Margaret's house. The Harrison Christmas tradition demanded we arrive the evening before and stay through Christmas night, a marathon of forced festivity that always left us emotionally drained. As Michael loaded the car, I noticed Lily carefully wrapping her ornament, then tucking it safely into her special velvet pouch. "Do you think this year will be different?" she asked quietly. I wanted to lie to promise her that her grandmother would suddenly transform into the warm, accepting person Lily deserved. Instead, I kissed the top of her head. We'll face it together whatever happens, I promised. The drive to Margaret's Bellevue mansion took us through neighbourhoods of escalating wealth. Regular houses gave way to luxury homes which surrendered to estates, until finally we turned onto the private road leading to the Harrison property. Even after all these years, the sheer ostentation of Margaret's home took my breath away. The colonial-style mansion sat on 5 manicured acres, with professional Christmas decorations that must have cost more than our mortgage. Thousands of white lights outlined the perfect symmetry of the house, illuminating the 4 massive pillars at the entrance. An enormous wreath hung on each window, and the legendary 20-foot Douglas fir, visible through the front window, was decorated in this year's theme, silver and blue, Margaret's tribute to winter elegance. "Here we go," Michael murmured as he parked between a Bentley and a Range Rover. "Remember, it's just 2 days. Just 2 days that could feel like 2 years." As we approached the imposing front door, I squeezed Lily's hand and plastered on my most convincing smile. The door swung open before we could ring the bell, revealing not Margaret, but her latest housekeeper, a nervous-looking woman who ushered us inside without making eye contact. The foyer gleamed with marble floors and a chandelier that probably cost more than Michael's annual salary. Christmas music played softly from hidden speakers, and the scent of pine and expensive candles filled the air. It was perfect, controlled, and utterly lacking in warmth. Margaret made her entrance as we handed our coats to the housekeeper. At 68, she remained a striking woman, tall, slender, with expertly coloured silver hair swept into an elegant updo. Her Christmas outfit, a tailored red dress with subtle designer logos on the gold buttons, probably cost more than our entire holiday budget. "There you are, finally," she said, air-kissing Michael on both cheeks before turning her critical gaze to me. "Isabella, that dress is festive." I resisted touching the green velvet dress I'd splurged on specifically for this occasion. "And Lily," Margaret continued, her eyes sweeping over my daughter, "you've grown, though your posture could use some work, darling. Shoulders back." Lily immediately straightened her face, already assuming the careful mask she wore around her grandmother. "I brought cranberry sauce," I offered, holding out the crystal dish containing my grandmother's recipe. Margaret took it with the enthusiasm of someone being handed a dead rodent. "How traditional. We're having Chef Pierre's cranberry compote with Grand Marnier, but I'm sure we can find space for this somewhere." And so it began. The house was already filled with relatives and friends. Michael's sister Amanda and her investment banker husband cousins from Boston, Margaret's friends from the country club, and the promised state senator and his wife. Everyone dressed impeccably, everyone watching each other for the slightest social misstep. As we moved through the crowd, I noticed several gazes lingering on us, or more specifically, assessing us. The unspoken question hung in the air: how does plain Isabella and her artistic daughter fit into this world of old money and influence? Margaret kept Lily close, introducing her to important guests, with a proprietary hand on her shoulder. "This is my granddaughter Lily. She attends Westlake Academy." The emphasis on the prestigious school name was obvious. Lily's only acceptable attribute was the education Margaret funded. I caught Lily's eye across the room and gave her an encouraging smile. We'd get through this together just like always. But as I watched Margaret's hawk-like gaze follow my daughter's every move, I couldn't shake the feeling that this Christmas would test us in ways we hadn't anticipated. Margaret's dining room looked like it had been transported directly from a luxury magazine spread. The 20-foot table gleamed with polished mahogany, set with her finest Wedgwood china sterling silver flatware that had been in the Harrison family for generations, and crystal glasses that caught the light from the enormous chandelier overhead. Each place setting included 3 forks, 2 knives, and multiple spoons arranged with military precision. The centerpiece featured white orchids, silver candelabras, and blue glass ornaments arranged by a professional decorator. As the 20 guests took their assigned seats, I noticed Margaret had placed Michael at one end of the table, near the senator, while Lily and I were seated in the middle, sandwiched between Amanda's husband Todd and Margaret's bridge partner Elaine. Not coincidentally, we were as far from Margaret's position at the head of the table as possible, while still being in the same room. Before the first course arrived, Margaret stood commanding immediate silence with nothing more than her presence. "Welcome to our annual Christmas celebration," she began, her voice carrying the cultivated accent of someone who had worked hard to erase any regional inflections. The Harrison family has maintained this tradition for over 40 years, and I'm delighted to continue honoring our legacy of excellence and refinement. Her gaze swept the table, lingering momentarily on Lily, who was anxiously counting the forks beside her plate. Family traditions matter, Margaret continued. They shape us, define us, and remind us of the standards to which we must all aspire. Some of you understand this inherently. She smiled at the senator and her country club friends. Others are still learning. This time, her eyes rested pointedly on me. Michael cleared his throat uncomfortably, but said nothing. The first course arrived. Lobster bisque served by staff in formal uniforms. I watched Lily carefully select the correct spoon, her shoulders tense with concentration. A wave of protective anger washed over me. No 14-year-old should have to navigate a meal like she's defusing a bomb. "So Isabella," said Elaine from beside me, "Margaret tells me you're still doing that little craft business." "I'm an interior designer," I corrected gently. "My firm just completed a project for the new cultural centre downtown." "How nice for you to have a hobby," she replied, clearly dismissing my career in a single sentence. Across the table, I could see Lily struggling with the heavy soup spoon, trying to take delicate sips without making noise. Margaret noticed too, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Lily, darling," she called down the table, causing every head to turn toward my daughter. "A lady sips from the side of the spoon, not the tip." Lily's face flushed crimson as she adjusted her technique. I saw her hand trembling slightly. "Leave the child alone, Margaret," came an unexpected voice. I turned to see Michael's great-aunt Patricia, a formidable 80-year-old, who was the only person who ever challenged Margaret. "The soup will get cold with all these ridiculous rules." Margaret's smile tightened, but she said nothing. Great-aunt Patricia gave Lily a conspiratorial wink, and I felt a surge of gratitude toward the elderly woman. As the meal progressed through 5 elaborate courses, I tried to maintain pleasant conversation while keeping an eye on Lily. She was trying so hard, back straight, small bites, dabbing her lips with the napkin just as we had practiced. But with each course, Margaret found something new to critique the way Lily held her knife. Her response when the senator's wife asked about school, even the volume of her voice when thanking the server. Michael, meanwhile, was deep in conversation with the senator about tax policy, occasionally glancing our way, but making no move to intervene. I watched him accept a third glass of wine, recognizing the signs of his own anxiety. "Isabella," Margaret called suddenly from the head of the table, silencing several conversations at once. "Tell everyone about your Christmas preparations this year. Did you manage to put up a tree in that compact house of yours?" The subtle dig at our home size, which was actually a perfectly lovely 4-bedroom in a good neighbourhood, didn't escape anyone's notice. "We have a beautiful 6-foot pine," I replied evenly. "Lily and I decorated it with ornaments we've collected over the years. Each one has a special memory attached." "How quaint," Margaret said with a thin smile. "Sentimental value over aesthetic cohesion. That's certainly one approach." Several guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Amanda, Michael's sister, quickly changed the subject to her recent vacation in the Maldives, and the attention mercifully shifted away from us. During a brief lull between courses, I excused myself to check on Lily in the guise of a restroom break. "How are you holding up?" I whispered as I pretended to help her adjust her napkin. "I'm okay," she replied, though her forced smile told me otherwise. "Grandma keeps staring at me like I'm going to break something." "You're doing beautifully," I assured her. "Just a few more hours and then we can relax." Back at the table, the main course was being served. Prime rib with truffle-infused potatoes and roasted vegetables arranged like a work of art. As we ate, Margaret expertly guided the conversation to showcase the family's accomplishments and connections. Amanda's husband discussed their recent donation to the symphony. Cousins from Boston detailed their children's Ivy League acceptances. Margaret herself mentioned her chairmanship of 3 different charity boards. No one asked about Lily's art or my work. We were background characters in the Harrison family performance. When dessert arrived, a course served a complex chocolate architecture that looked too perfect to eat. Margaret once again took control of the conversation. "Before we move to the living room for gifts," she announced, "I'd like to recognize some special moments from the past year." What followed was essentially a family highlight reel curated to emphasize achievements Margaret valued. Academic honors, professional promotions, and social connections dominated the list. When she mentioned Lily, it was only to note her acceptable grades at the prestigious school Margaret paid for, with no mention of the art award my daughter had won, or the short story that had been published in a youth magazine. I could see Lily shrinking in her seat, her confidence eroding with every word left unsaid. As the dinner finally concluded, Margaret instructed everyone to proceed to the living room for coffee and the formal gift exchange. As we rose, I noticed Michael had moved to his mother's side, helping her arrange something. He caught my eye briefly, an apologetic look on his face, before turning back to Margaret. The message was clear: we were on our own. The formal living room was Margaret's pride and joy, a showpiece designed more for appearance than comfort. The soaring ceiling featured hand-painted details, and the furniture, while exquisite, seemed to warn guests against actually sitting on it. The enormous Christmas tree dominated one corner, its coordinated ornaments and perfectly spaced lights a testament to the professional decorator who had installed it. Beneath the tree sat dozens of wrapped packages, each with precision corners and designer ribbon that matched Margaret's silver and blue theme. Even the gift wrapping adhered to her standards of perfection. The gift exchange at Margaret's house wasn't the chaotic paper-ripping affair that occurred in most homes. Instead, it followed a strict protocol. Gifts were distributed by the youngest family member, normally Lily, though she always seemed uncomfortable in this role, then opened one at a time, so everyone could properly admire each item. As guests settled into the arranged seating, Margaret's housekeeper served coffee in delicate china cups alongside petit fours on silver trays. I found a spot on a stiff brocade settee, and Lily sat beside me, her hand slipping into mine beneath the folds of my dress. "It's almost over," I whispered to her, and she nodded, though I could feel the tension in her small fingers. Margaret directed Lily to begin distributing gifts. My daughter moved carefully around the room, her movements deliberate, as she navigated between expensive furniture and judgmental gazes. I watched her check each tag and deliver packages with a polite smile, even to those who had ignored her all evening. The pride I felt in her grace was overwhelming. 14 years old and handling herself with more dignity than most adults in the room. As Lily completed her task and returned to my side, Margaret announced that the senator's wife should open the first gift, an obvious nod to the social hierarchy Margaret maintained. The pattern continued with guests opening gifts in order of Margaret's perceived importance. When it was finally Lily's turn to open a gift from her cousin, she carefully removed the paper, making sure not to tear it. Another of Margaret's rules. Inside was a gift card to a bookstore, and Lily's genuine smile lit up her face as she thanked her cousin sincerely. As the opening continued around the circle, Lily reached into her small purse and pulled out the velvet pouch containing the ornament she had made for Margaret. Her expression was a mixture of hope and apprehension that broke my heart. "I have something special for Grandma," she said, her voice barely audible. "I made it myself." Several guests exchanged glances, clearly aware of Margaret's preference for expensive store-bought gifts. Michael looked up sharply from his conversation with Amanda, suddenly alert to the potential situation developing. Lily stood and carefully crossed to where Margaret sat in her favourite armchair, positioned to oversee the entire proceedings like a queen on her throne. "Merry Christmas, Grandma," Lily said, holding out the small pouch. Margaret's smile was tight as she accepted it. "How thoughtful, dear! Though you know you didn't need to go to any trouble." The subtext was clear to everyone. Homemade gifts were beneath the Harrison standard. As Lily turned to make her way back to her seat, she had to pass a side table where several guests had placed their coffee cups. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The hem of Lily's dress caught the edge of a napkin draped over the side of the table. As she moved, the napkin slid, pulling a cup with it. Before anyone could react, a full cup of cranberry juice, which one of the younger cousins had been drinking, tipped over and splashed across Margaret's imported white carpet. The deep red liquid spread like a blood stain across the pristine white fibres. The room fell absolutely silent. Lily froze, horror dawning on her face as she realised what had happened. Margaret stared at the spreading stain, her expression transforming from shock to cold fury in the span of seconds. When she finally spoke, her voice cut through the silence like ice. "This," she said, each word precisely enunciated, "is exactly what happens when children aren't taught proper deportment and spatial awareness." Lily's face crumpled. "I'm so sorry, Grandma. It was an accident. I can clean it." "Don't touch anything else," Margaret snapped, rising from her chair. "You've done quite enough damage." The venom in her voice made several guests flinch. "It's just a spill," I said, standing quickly. "Accidents happen. We can clean it up." Margaret turned to me, 16 years of thinly veiled contempt suddenly unleashed. Accidents happen regularly around your daughter Isabella because you've never taught her to be careful or considerate of valuable things. This carpet was imported from Milan. It's irreplaceable. Mother, Michael finally intervened, setting down his scotch glass. It's Christmas. Let's not make a scene over a simple mistake. But Margaret was beyond being calmed. Years of suppressed disappointment in her son's choice of wife, in her granddaughter's failure to meet Harrison standards, erupted in a tirade that left no doubt about her true feelings. This is not a simple mistake. This is the culmination of years of substandard parenting and values I've had to witness. Your wife has raised a child who has no respect for tradition, propriety, or the value of things. Look at this room, filled with important guests, and your daughter creates this embarrassing spectacle. Tears streamed down Lily's cheeks as her grandmother continued. I've tried for years to instill proper standards to give this child advantages her mother never had. And this is how she repays my generosity, by ruining a priceless carpet and embarrassing the family in front of Senator Brennan. The senator looked deeply uncomfortable, as did most of the guests, but no one spoke up. Margaret turned back to Lily, who was shaking with silent sobs. I think it's best if you remove yourself from the gathering until you can behave appropriately. Perhaps you can sit in the kitchen until we finish the gifts. Clearly you can't be trusted around valuable things. The cruelty of the words hung in the air. Michael half rose from his seat, conflict written across his face, but ultimately he remained silent, caught between loyalty to his mother and defense of his daughter. His silence was the final betrayal. I watched as Lily, humiliated and heartbroken, turned and fled the room. The velvet pouch with her carefully crafted ornament lay forgotten on the floor near Margaret's feet. The room remained uncomfortably silent as the housekeeper hurried in with cleaning supplies. Margaret, composing herself, turned to her guests with a tight smile. My apologies for the interruption. Teenagers can be so impulsive. Now where were we? And just like that, she attempted to resume the festivities, acting as if she hadn't just crushed a 14-year-old's spirit in front of 20 witnesses. I stood, frozen rage and heartbreak warring within me. After 16 years of swallowing my responses, of teaching Lily to accommodate Margaret's impossible standards, something inside me finally snapped. Without a word to anyone, not even Michael, I turned and followed my daughter out of the room. I found Lily in the massive kitchen, huddled in a corner chair, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The kitchen staff worked around her, pretending not to notice her distress, while casting sympathetic glances in her direction. They'd obviously witnessed similar scenes before. "Sweetheart," I said softly, kneeling beside her chair. She looked up, her face streaked with tears, makeup smudged around her eyes. Everyone was watching Mom. Everyone heard what she said about me. I pulled her into my arms, not caring that her tears were staining my dress. "What your grandmother said was cruel and completely untrue. You are kind, creative, and wonderful exactly as you are." Lily pulled back, wiping furiously at her eyes. "Why does she hate me so much? What did I do wrong?" The question broke my heart. "You've done nothing wrong, Lily. Nothing. This is about her issues, not yours." "But Dad didn't even say anything," she whispered, a fresh wave of pain washing over her face. "He just sat there." I couldn't defend Michael in that moment, though I understood the complicated dynamic that had rendered him silent. His failure to protect his daughter was inexcusable, but explaining his lifelong pattern of appeasing his mother wouldn't help Lily now. "Sometimes people we love disappoint us," I said carefully. "Your father loves you, but he struggles with standing up to Grandma. That's his weakness, not a reflection on you." Lily sniffed, then looked at me with unexpected intensity. "Grandma's always like this. You just don't always see it." "What do you mean?" "When you're not around, when Dad takes me to visit alone, she says things about how I should be more like Amanda's kids, about how you don't understand what it means to be a Harrison. She says I'm too much like you, and it's not a compliment." A cold anger settled in my chest. Margaret had been undermining me to my daughter behind my back for years, and Michael had allowed it. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, keeping my voice gentle. Lily shrugged, looking suddenly much older than 14. "Dad always says Grandma doesn't mean anything by it, that it's just her way, and I didn't want to make things worse between you and her." My child had been protecting me while I thought I was protecting her. The realization was a punch to the gut. As we sat together in the kitchen's relative warmth, a memory surfaced from early in my marriage. During our second Christmas with Margaret, I had accidentally broken a crystal ornament while helping decorate. Margaret had berated me in front of everyone, making cutting remarks about people who aren't accustomed to handling fine things. Michael had remained silent then too, and later explained that his mother was simply particular about her possessions. I had swallowed my hurt and humiliation for his sake, establishing the pattern that would define the next decade and a half. I had taught my daughter by example to accept disrespect in the name of keeping peace. "I'm so sorry, Lily," I said, taking her hands in mine. "I've been trying so hard to maintain a relationship with your grandmother that I've allowed her to hurt both of us. That stops tonight." Lily looked at me with surprise. "What are you going to do?" I wasn't entirely sure yet. Part of me wanted to pack our bags and leave immediately, but another part, a stronger part, knew that running away would only reinforce Margaret's narrative about us. "I'm going to stand up for us," I said finally. "For you, for me, for the wonderful people we are without apology. And I need to know if you're okay with that. This is your family too, and you have a say in how we handle this." I expected Lily to want to leave to escape further humiliation. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and wiped away the last of her tears. "I think," she said slowly, "that I want to give Grandma her Christmas gift. The one I made. Even if she doesn't like it, I worked hard on it and I'm proud of it." Her courage took my breath away. After everything that had happened, my daughter wasn't running away. She was standing firm in her own worth. "There's something else," Lily added, her voice stronger now. "I want to say something to Grandma, to everyone, about family and respect and what Christmas is supposed to be about." "Are you sure?" I asked, both proud and protective. "You don't have to face them again tonight." Lily nodded. "I'm sure. If we leave now, nothing will change. Grandma will just tell everyone we're oversensitive and dramatic. I want them to hear my side. I want to stand up for myself." In that moment, I saw in my daughter a strength I had been trying to find in myself for 16 years. She was ready to speak her truth regardless of the consequences. A soft cough interrupted our conversation. I looked up to see Margaret's housekeeper Eleanor standing nearby with a damp cloth. "For the young Mrs. Face," she said kindly, handing the cloth to Lily. "And if I may—" She hesitated, then continued in a lower voice. "I've worked for Mrs. Harrison for 8 years. Many children have cried in this kitchen. You're not alone." The simple acknowledgement from a witness to Margaret's pattern of behaviour bolstered my resolve. As Lily cleaned her face, I took out my phone and quickly called my mother. Though it was Christmas Eve, I knew she'd answer, and I needed her steady voice before we returned to the lion's den. "Mom," I said when she picked up, "I need your strength right now." In just a few minutes, I explained the situation. My mother, who had watched me struggle with Margaret for years, didn't waste time on outrage. "Isabella, listen to me," she said firmly. "You are strong enough for this. You always have been. Stop trying to win that woman's approval and start demanding her respect. Not just for your sake, but for Lily's. Show your daughter what it means to stand in your power." Her words were exactly what I needed to hear. When I hung up, Lily and I looked at each other, a new understanding passing between us. We weren't going back into that room as victims or apologists. We were going in with dignity and truth. As we prepared to return to the living room, Eleanor touched my arm gently. "The carpet will clean just fine," she whispered. "Mrs. Harrison knows that. It's not about the carpet." I nodded my thanks for this final confirmation. "Ready?" I asked Lily. My daughter squared her shoulders and lifted her chin. "Ready." When Lily and I re-entered the living room, the gift exchange was continuing with strained politeness. Conversations were unnaturally hushed, and several guests avoided making eye contact with us. Margaret sat regally in her chair, acting as though nothing unpleasant had occurred, though I noticed the velvet pouch containing Lily's ornament had been moved to a side table unopened. Michael's posture tensed as he saw us, relief and apprehension warring on his face. I deliberately chose not to look at him directly. His chance to stand up for his daughter had passed. The room didn't immediately fall silent, but conversations gradually died away as people noticed our return. Some looked curious, others uncomfortable. Margaret's expression hardened slightly, but she continued chatting with the senator's wife as if we were invisible. I gently squeezed Lily's hand, and she gave me a small nod before stepping forward. Despite everything, she moved with a grace that made my heart swell with pride. "Excuse me," Lily said, her voice quiet but steady. "I'd like to say something." Margaret's conversation faltered, her annoyance barely concealed behind a tight smile. "Lily dear, we're in the middle of the gift exchange. Perhaps later would be more appropriate." "I think now is the perfect time," I interjected, my voice calmer than I felt. Since we're celebrating family and the Christmas spirit. Michael half rose from his seat, clearly torn between his usual role as peacekeeper and the growing realization that something significant was unfolding. Margaret's eyes narrowed slightly, but with a room full of witnesses, she was constrained by her own rules of propriety. "Very well," she said coldly. Briefly, Lily took a deep breath and stepped into the center of the room. I noticed her hands were trembling slightly, but her voice remained strong and clear. "First, I want to apologize again for the accident with the juice. It was truly not intentional." Several guests nodded encouragingly. "But I also wanted to say something about family," Lily continued. "For years, I've tried so hard to be what you wanted, Grandma. I've practiced table manners and proper posture. I've tried to be quiet and perfect and invisible when necessary." Margaret's face registered shock at being directly addressed this way by a child. "I thought if I just tried hard enough, you might actually see me," Lily said, emotion creeping into her voice. "Not as a Harrison obligation or a project to fix, but as your granddaughter who just wants to be loved for who she is." The room had gone completely still. Even the staff had paused in their duties, watching the scene unfold. Every Christmas, every visit, I leave feeling like I've failed somehow, like I'm not good enough. And tonight, when you sent me away in front of everyone, Lily's voice cracked slightly, but she steadied herself. "It hurt, really hurt. Not because I spilled juice on a carpet, but because you made it clear that the carpet matters more to you than I do." Margaret's face flushed. "That is not what happened. You're being overly dramatic and misinterpreting." "I'm not finished," Lily said quietly, with a firmness that silenced her grandmother instantly. The collective intake of breath around the room was audible. No one interrupted Margaret Harrison, ever. "I made you something special for Christmas," Lily continued, walking over to retrieve the velvet pouch from the side table. "I spent weeks on it, getting every detail right." She opened the pouch and carefully removed the crystal ornament. Even from where I stood, I could see the exquisite detail of the miniature painting inside. Margaret's house in winter, rendered with love and extraordinary skill. "I painted your house because despite everything, I still hope someday it might feel like a place where I belong." Lily held out the ornament. "You don't have to like it or display it, but I want you to know I made it with love because that's what Christmas is supposed to be about. Not perfect carpets or the right forks or impressing senators." Margaret stared at the ornament, momentarily speechless. For just an instant, I thought I saw something soften in her expression. "Family is supposed to be where you're safest to make mistakes," Lily continued, looking around the room. "Where you're loved even when you spill things or use the wrong fork or don't get into the right schools. At least that's what Mum has always taught me." I felt tears prickling behind my eyes at her words. "I don't want expensive presents or fancy dinners," Lily said, turning back to Margaret. "I just want a grandmother who sees me, really sees me, and loves me anyway. Is that too much to ask at Christmas?" The raw honesty of her question hung in the air. Margaret remained frozen, the ornament still held out between them like a peace offering. The silence stretched uncomfortably until it was broken by an unexpected voice. "The child is right," said Great Aunt Patricia, rising slowly from her seat with the aid of her cane. "This family has forgotten what matters." She moved to stand beside Lily, placing a gnarled hand on my daughter's shoulder. "I've watched for years as you've tried to mold this child into some outdated ideal of propriety, Margaret. And for what? So she can impress people who won't remember her name tomorrow." Margaret's mouth opened and closed, but no words emerged. "Look at what you've done," Great Aunt Patricia continued, gesturing to Lily. "This remarkable young woman created something beautiful for you, and instead of recognizing her talent and her heart, you banished her over a spilled drink." Several other guests began to murmur in agreement. The tide was turning. "I've been coming to these Christmas gatherings for 40 years, Great Aunt Patricia announced to the room, "and I can't remember the last time they felt like Christmas. Can any of you—" The uncomfortable shifting of the guests suggested she had struck a chord. Michael finally found his voice, standing and moving toward his daughter. "Lily's right," he said, his voice stronger than I'd heard it in years when addressing his mother. "And so is Aunt Patricia. This isn't what Christmas should be." He turned to Margaret, who was still holding the ornament, her expression unreadable. "Mother, you've given us many things over the years, but at what cost? Look at what just happened. Look at what you said to my daughter, your granddaughter." Margaret lifted her chin defensively. "I simply have standards, Michael. Standards that have defined this family for generations." Standards that are destroying this family, he replied quietly. I've allowed it for too long. No more. He placed his arm around Lily's shoulders. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner, sweetheart. I should have protected you better. Kidding, The simple acknowledgement brought fresh tears to Lily's eyes, but these were different. Tears of relief and vindication. Margaret looked around the room, seemingly realizing she was losing control of her carefully orchestrated gathering. Her gaze settled on me, standing quietly behind my daughter, and I saw a flicker of something new in her eyes. Uncertainty. Isabella, she began, her tone moderated but still cool. Surely you understand the importance of teaching children proper behavior, and what I understand, I interrupted calmly, is that my daughter just showed more maturity, courage, and genuine Christmas spirit than most of the adults in this room, myself included. I'm not interested in your justifications, Margaret. I'm only interested in how you plan to treat Lily going forward. Margaret glanced down at the ornament in her hands, examining it properly for the first time. Something shifted in her expression as she took in the detail, the care, the obvious talent. You painted this? She asked Lily directly, her voice softer. Lily nodded. Every brushstroke. It's remarkable, Margaret admitted, sounding genuinely surprised. I had no idea you were so talented. There's a lot you don't know about me, Grandma, Lily replied simply. A heavy silence fell over the room as Margaret seemed to struggle internally. For 16 years, I had watched this woman maintain absolute control in every situation. Now faced with the unvarnished truth spoken by a child that control was slipping. Perhaps, Margaret said finally, choosing her words with care, I have been overly concerned with appearances. It wasn't an apology, but from Margaret Harrison this admission was seismic. And perhaps, she continued looking directly at Lily, I have failed to appreciate certain qualities that don't fit my traditional expectations. She gently hung the ornament on a branch of the Christmas tree, stepping back to observe it against the coordinated decorations. It's actually quite beautiful there. The gesture, small but significant, sent a ripple of relaxed relief through the room. Conversations gradually resumed, though, with a different tone than before. Several guests approached Lily, admiring her artwork and engaging her in genuine conversation for the first time that evening. Margaret maintained her dignity, but seemed oddly diminished watching from her chair as the gathering transformed around her. The rigid formality had cracked, allowing something more authentic to emerge. Michael came to stand beside me, his expression a mixture of regret and resolve. I should have done that years ago, he said quietly. For both of you. I didn't absolve him immediately. Yes, you should have. He nodded, accepting the truth of it. Things will be different now, I promise. Kitten. I'd heard that promise before, but something in his demeanour suggested this time might be different. The pattern had been broken not just for Lily, but perhaps for all of us. As the evening continued, I watched my daughter move through the room with a new confidence. She had spoken her truth and survived. More than survived, she had changed something fundamental in the dynamic of this family. I caught her eye across the room, and she gave me a small smile that contained both wisdom and hope. In that moment, I realized my daughter had given all of us a Christmas gift far more valuable than anything under the tree. We left Margaret's house earlier than planned that Christmas Eve. After the dramatic events in the living room, staying overnight as originally scheduled felt unnecessary. Margaret didn't protest our departure, which itself was unprecedented. As we said our goodbyes, she surprised everyone by hugging Lily, awkwardly but genuinely, and telling her she would display the ornament prominently on the tree for all visitors to admire. The drive home was quiet at first, each of us processing the evening's events in our own way. Michael broke the silence halfway home. I'm sorry, he said simply. To both of you. I've been a coward for years. Why? Lily asked from the back seat, the single word containing years of hurt and confusion. Michael sighed deeply. It's complicated, sweetheart. My relationship with Grandma has always been challenging. She has certain expectations, and I've spent my entire life trying to meet them. Even at our expense, I asked quietly. Yes. He admitted, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. And that was wrong. Watching Lily tonight, seeing her courage, made me realize how badly I failed you both. He glanced in the rearview mirror at our daughter. You were amazing, Lily. Braver than I've ever been. She met his eyes in the mirror. I was scared, Dad. Really scared. That's what makes it brave, he replied. doing the right thing even when it terrifies you. We spent the rest of the drive talking more openly than we had in years. Michael shared stories about growing up under Margaret's exacting standards, the constant pressure to uphold the Harrison name. I spoke about how isolating it had felt to navigate Margaret's world without his support. And Lily described how she had felt torn between two worlds, the creative, accepting environment of our home and the rigid, judgmental atmosphere at her grandmother's. By the time we arrived home, something had shifted between us. The facade of managing the Margaret situation had crumbled, replaced by an honest acknowledgement of the damage it had caused and a commitment to change. Our own Christmas morning was wonderfully ordinary. Pancakes in pajamas, presents unwrapped with abandoned glee, and no crystal glasses or proper forks in sight. Lily seemed lighter somehow, as if standing up to Margaret had lifted a weight she'd been carrying for years. The days after Christmas brought unexpected developments. Michael's sister Amanda called ostensibly to check on Lily, but really to say she'd been impressed by her niece's courage. Mother has always been difficult, she admitted, but no one ever calls her on it, until Lily. More surprisingly, Michael actually followed through on his promise to establish boundaries with his mother. When Margaret called on December 26th with passive-aggressive comments about our dramatic exit, he calmly but firmly told her that her treatment of Lily and me needed to change if she wanted a relationship with any of us. "I've enabled this dynamic for too long, Mother," I overheard him say. "It stops now." There was a long silence from Margaret's end, followed by what sounded like genuine reflection. "Perhaps I have been set in my ways," she conceded finally. The girl's speech was quite moving, I must admit. It wasn't a full apology, but from Margaret Harrison, it was revolutionary. In the weeks that followed, Michael continued to surprise me with his newfound backbone. When Margaret suggested Lily attend an etiquette class for her upcoming birthday, Michael declined firmly. "Lily is perfect exactly as she is," he told his mother. "If you want to give her something, make it something that celebrates her creativity." The most stunning development came 3 weeks after Christmas. A small package arrived addressed to Lily, bearing Margaret's return address. Inside was a gift certificate to a prestigious art supply store and a handwritten note, "Your ornament is admired by everyone who visits. You have a gift. Perhaps there are different kinds of Harrison excellence after all." "Grandma," Lily read the note twice, then looked up at me with wide eyes. "Is this real? Is she actually saying my art is good?" "It seems that way," I said, equally surprised. "People can change, I guess, even Margaret Harrison." "Do you think things will be different now?" Lily asked. "With Grandma and everything?" I considered the question carefully. "I think they already are different. Not perfect, not completely fixed, but changed. Because you had the courage to speak your truth." Lily smiled, a quiet confidence in her expression that hadn't been there before. "It was scary, but it felt right, like I finally stopped trying to be someone else." The next family gathering at dinner in late January proved her right. Margaret's home was still immaculate. The dinner still formal by most standards, but the atmosphere had shifted subtly. Margaret made a visible effort to ask Lily about her art projects and actually listened to the answers. She still made the occasional critical comment, but Michael consistently redirected these moments, and Margaret actually stopped herself several times mid-critique. Most tellingly, when Lily accidentally knocked over a water glass, Margaret simply signalled the housekeeper for a towel and continued her conversation without comment. Progress, not perfection. As winter turned to spring, I watched my daughter bloom with newfound confidence. Standing up to her grandmother had taught her something powerful, that her worth wasn't determined by others' judgments, and that speaking her truth, even when difficult, could create positive change. For my part, I stopped walking on eggshells around Margaret. Our relationship would never be warm, but it had evolved into something resembling mutual respect. She no longer commented on my parenting or my home, and I no longer pretended to care about impressing her social circle. Michael continued his own journey, gradually unwinding the complicated patterns of his relationship with his mother, while strengthening his connections with Lily and me. Some days were better than others, but the direction was clear. The most unexpected development came in early May when a letter arrived for Lily. Inside was an invitation to display her artwork at a student showcase sponsored by one of Margaret's charity boards. The personal note attached read simply, "Your talent deserves recognition. I would be proud to have you represent the family. Grandma." When Lily showed me the letter, tears glistening in her eyes, I understood that the true gift of that turbulent Christmas hadn't been the resolution of all family tensions or the perfect redemption of Margaret Harrison. The gift had been finding our voices, establishing our boundaries, and learning that authentic relationships, even difficult ones, were built on truth and mutual respect rather than accommodation and fear. "Mum," Lily said thoughtfully as she reread the invitation, "do you think Grandma would have ever changed if I hadn't said anything that night?" I shook my head. "Probably not. Some people never hear the truth until someone is brave enough to speak it." Lily nodded a quiet wisdom in her expression. "I'm glad I said something then, not just for me, but maybe for Grandma too. It must be exhausting being perfect all the time." Her insight took my breath away. At 14, my daughter understood something that had taken me decades to learn, that behind controlling behavior often lies fear and insecurity, and that speaking truth with compassion can sometimes begin to heal both the controlled and the controller. As I watched Lily carefully place Margaret's invitation on her bulletin board, I realized that the Christmas that had begun with humiliation and tears had ultimately given my daughter an invaluable gift: the knowledge of her own power, her own worth, and her own voice. Some lessons can only be learned through difficult moments. Sometimes the most meaningful gifts come wrapped in the most challenging packages, and sometimes a single moment of courage can change the course of relationships for years to come. Have you ever had to stand up to a family member to protect yourself or someone you love? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and share with anyone who might be struggling with difficult family dynamics. Remember, speaking your truth with dignity is always worth it, even when it's hard. Thank you for listening to our story, and I wish you the courage to find your voice in whatever challenges you're facing.